Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the webinar today, which is in the series of webinars leading up to the Congress. Today, I am very pleased to be the host. And my name is Lisa Borg-Andersen. I'm the Director of Communications and Congresses for Ertico ITS Europe. So welcome. As I said, it is part of a series of webinars that really take us on the journey towards the actual European Congress in Toulouse, end of May. This is the third webinar, and typically we dedicate each webinar to one of the key topics. And today the topic is green and sustainable mobility, one of the key topics of the Congress, that is. So today is about green and sustainable mobility, and before I move to the agenda, a couple of house rules. As usual, everybody is in listening mode. You are very welcome to ask questions though through the tool, and we will have a Q&A session at the end. Also, the webinar is recorded and will be shared through the communication channels of Ertico. So with that, let's have a look at the agenda. So as you can see, the agenda falls in two parts. First, there is a more general part. I will give a Congress overview, and that will be followed by a welcome from our CEO, Joost van Tomme. And then we welcome Isabel van Doorne from the European Commission's DG Move, where she is Deputy Head of Unit. And Isabel will give us a general background overview of the EU Urban Mobility Framework. And then we will move to the second part of this agenda, which is a panel discussion going more into depth of the day, of the topic of the day. And my colleague Jean-Charles Pandasis will be moderating, and Jean-Charles is Senior Manager at the Innovation and Deployment Department of Ertico. So that is the agenda for today, and as I said, there will then be also a little bit of time for a Q&A at the end. So with that, a quick update on the Congress. For those who have not joined us before in this webinar series, here is at a glance of the Congress, which takes place from Monday the 30th of May until Wednesday the 1st of June, so 3 full days. And these 3 days span across the high-level program that you see here, with plenaries, with an opening sessions, with an ITS summit, bringing people from the public and private sphere together. But it also spans a technical program with around 100 technical sessions throughout the day. And then it also covers the exhibition, of course, and demonstrations and technical visits. And in addition, on the Wednesday, there is a public day that opens up the doors to everybody under the sun who wants to learn more about mobility. Importantly, registrations have opened, and as you can see, the early bird rate is available until the 19th of April. So good idea to register in the weeks to come. Also wanted to give a highlight on some of the high-level speakers that we have. They are speaking both in the opening and in the closing, as well as in the 4 plenaries. And as you can see, we have representatives from the European institutions. We have representatives from the general ecosystem, companies, organizations. We also have representation from Europe, but also from our sister regions, ITS America, as an example. So we really have a fantastic lineup of speakers, all experts in their fields, who will be discussing some of the themes that fall under the overarching umbrella of the Congress. If we go to the next slide, a quick update on exhibitors. Here is a number of the exhibitors who have already signed up. It is still possible to reach out. You have the address of the website handy. There are still opportunities for small or bigger stands so that you can join the rest of the ecosystem. Also, apart from exhibitors, there is also an opportunity for commercial partnership. If we go to the next slide, and that partnership can fall in many different ways. Here are just a couple of them. It is possible to be a keynote speaker or a panelist in one of the 4 plenaries, or you can have a more personalized session, either a workshop or a breakfast session. So there again, there are still opportunities if you want to be active beyond participating yourself. There is always a possibility to stay up to date with the preparations and the developments, either through our website, through our newsletter as well, or of course through our social channels that you have here on the slide. So that was a speedy, quick update on the Congress itself. And now let's move to the topic of today. As I said, this is all about green and sustainable mobility. And as the word cloud suggests, it is quite a broad topic, ranging from electromobility, electrification, renewable energy, user engagement, etc., etc. This whole theme, as Jean-Charles will talk about as well, is really one of the key focus areas for Artico Clean and Eco-Mobility. But as I said, and that's why we're discussing it here today, it is also one of the 5 topics of the European ITS Congress in Toulouse. And you can see on the next slide that it does indeed cut across sorry, many of the plenaries that we have mentioned before, the 4 plenaries here. And there are also quite a number of the sessions in the technical program that will touch upon green and sustainable mobility. You can see here this goes for both the special interest sessions, the technical papers, and the research papers. So with that, I believe that I have given a quick introduction, and I would now like to hand over to our CEO, Joost van Tomme, for his welcome. Please, Joost, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lisa. Good morning, good noon, good afternoon, good evening, good night. From my side, Joost here with the Artico team. Extremely pleased to have this 3rd webinar. I think it's important to get you up to speed where we are in the preparations for the Congress. This is a great Congress. It will also be fantastic to be in Toulouse. We had the opportunity with the team to be in Toulouse, and I can tell you it's a great environment. It's a lot of with industry, mobility. There is even a new telepheric that you will see in action, in motion, I have to say, and it's multimodal. So I'm pretty sure that we will host a nice conference there, and looking forward to seeing all of you there. Next slide. So on this, I would say today, as Lisa mentioned, our focus areas within Artico fourfold. And definitely clean and eco-mobility is an important one. It's not only about CO2 and climate, it's definitely also about air pollution and the better use of space also in cities. And I'm sure that Isabel will entertain us with this topic on urban mobility. The other topics that we work very hard on is CCAM, so connected, cooperative and automated mobility, urban mobility and mass. We have even the luxury to host a mass alliance, and very happy to have them in our ecosystem of Ertico with the more than 100 companies and institutions delivering mass services and interoperability. And finally, transport and logistics, very important. It's about bringing goods from a warehouse, from the production facilities to I would say, to ports, to harbors, to containers across the ocean, but also to have the last mile delivery. And that's obviously also a big ticket, especially now in the COVID pandemic that we got, is delivery of goods at home and at your shops. Next slide. These topics were not chosen like at random. No, they were deliberately chosen after a deep discussion with policymakers, mostly European Commission directors and heads of units and the staff behind, where we have selected very carefully these topics. Why? They match very well with the European agenda and also the global agenda, but especially the European agenda on these 4 topics. And secondly, we see traction in terms of the regulatory policy framework. So on new policies come up, either directives, regulations, guidance documents, such as the urban mobility strategy that we saw in December last year. All this is being nurtured, being followed up by us, by working groups, our strategy committee in Ertico, and obviously our 120 partners in our partnership. Next slide, and the final slide before we move really to the meat, the heart of the matter. We launched a city moonshot. Actually, my predecessor launched this with the team. We have published yesterday the first results of a large questionnaire that we gave with 100, well, more than 300 cities actually in total around the world. It's not only Europe. And we asked them questions around these 4 pillars. So smart, sustainable mobility, other use of space, etc. And this global survey has been published yesterday. I all want to invite you to go to the website. It's very easy, ertico.com, and then City Moonshot. What you see is that our topic of today is extremely timely, but also extremely important. We haven't had any interview that didn't talk about sustainability, climate, and air pollution. Everybody has it in agenda. It's part of most of the SUMs, so Sustainable Urban Mobility Plans, and we are also working with a lot of cities to make this happen. So when we saw the survey and the results of that, which are now published in a very methodological manner, sustainability is number 1. Data sharing, the mobility data spaces, smart cities is number 2, and obviously mass and also transport as a service is number 3 in terms of relevance and importance, but also in terms of budget spent by cities to these topics. And you see also in the study what kind of measures these cities are taking to this. So with this, I will not longer talk from my side. Happy to have all of you here in the webinar. A lot of people I see online, all our friends, and looking forward to a good dialogue and actually to seeing you live at the conference and our Congress in Toulouse. Back to you, Lisa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joost. I would now like to give the floor to our guest from the European Commission that I introduced before, Isabel, Deputy Head of Unit from DG Move, who's going to talk about the EU Urban Mobility Framework. Isabel, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you. So yes, indeed, I will talk about the EU Urban Mobility Framework, called by Joost the Urban Mobility Strategy. Next slide, please. Basically, we have adopted this new document, this new policy document in December as part of the package. And on this slide, I would like to give you, let's say, the main point, the key element of the framework. So first, what is very important, and for an ITS community, it's very important, is that we propose that we change the focus from traffic management to the movement of people and goods. And of course, to move, they should move sustainably. And we also want to make life easier for rural and suburban commuters, because we have also seen and we see that in the yearly report that congestion is there and will remain. And so you need to address the movement of the one coming to the city or going out of the city. We need to provide them with a sustainable solution if we want to address congestion, if we want to address air pollution, for example. And then the third element is that we want to support cities in their role as transport hub within a single market. So the cities that are what we call urban nodes in the trans-European network. The main, let's say, items of message we want to pass in the framework is that we want a stronger public transport network. We want a focus on walking and cycling. We want zero emission urban logistics. We want, I have said this already, a better management of mobility flows. Multimodal hubs and digital solutions are key in that regard. We want modern railway station connecting with public transport and other urban mobility services. We also need park and ride facilities, because if you want to generate the modal shift, you need a place where the people will leave their car and take another modes of transport. In the freight sector, we need multimodal terminals, and we need sustainable and well-functioning passenger transport on demand. Next slide, please. On this slide, you see the building blocks or the chapter of the communication on the new urban mobility framework. I will go through some of them in the next slide. Maybe worth to mention, because I don't think that I have a slide on it, is that the urban mobility framework is part of the global, let's say, the new approach we have, the holistic approach we have in the Commission with the climate neutral and smart cities. Next slide, please. So one of the building blocks is a reinforced approach to the TEN-T urban nodes, so TEN-T Trans-European Network. And urban nodes are, let's say, the key element you see on the slide, connecting the different corridors and so the main line of the transport network. And we want, now we are proposing that we have 424 urban nodes instead of 88, and we want them to have a SUMP. Jos has already mentioned the word SUMP, or the acronym SUMP, which is Sustainable Urban Mobility Plan. We want them to have all of them a plan by 2025, drafted in accordance with our guidelines. We also want that they collect data to feed the urban mobility indicators, the SUMI, because what we have observed is that we need to monitor the progress to see if we are reaching our climate neutrality goals. And for the time being, we are not able to do that. So there are a lot of work around it. Then I have already mentioned the multimodal freight and passenger hubs. An important element as well, I mentioned the digital solutions here. In the regulation on the TEN-T, we are asking that urban nodes have provision to provide access to the information, book and pay, and retrieve transport ticket. And then there are other elements in the list of requirements on the urban nodes. Was to mention that in the Annex 5 of the proposed TEN-T regulation, there is an annex describing the main element of what is a SUMP. Next slide, please. Another element of the communication on the new urban mobility framework is that at the end of this year, we will come with a recommendation to member states to put in place a national long-term SUMP support program, because we have seen that the cities and the regions, they need to be accompanied, they need help to build capacity. We also need a national program manager to make sure that the SUMPs that are implemented in compliance with the SUMP guidelines. But we will also use that opportunity to upgrade a bit the SUMP concept, to make it up to date, let's say it like that. For example, we need to make sure that we have sustainable urban logistic plans, well recognized in the sustainable urban mobility plans. We will also work with the European Covenant of Mayors, and we also want to push public and private organizations to develop respective mobility management plan to accompany for the employers to accompany their employees, for the schools to accompany the parents bringing their children in a safe and sustainable way, and so on and so forth. Next slide, please. Other action that we have, and these slides a bit give you the list of relevant actions related to digitalization, innovation, and new mobility services, because as I said, we need digital solution to have a sustainable urban mobility. So we have used the revision of the ITS directive. Our colleagues are working on a new initiative on multimodal digital mobility services, which will be very important for the development of mass, and so on and so forth. So I will not go through the lists. Maybe a little point that in the framework of new mobility services, our colleagues have issued on the 2nd of February a new guidance notice on regulating taxi and private hire vehicles for more sustainable, accessible, and fair services. Next slide, please. Another element of the urban mobility framework is the micromobility, and more broadly, the focus on sustainable and active modes of transport like walking and cycling. On this slide, you see that we have already issued some topic guide on the safe use of micromobility. It was drafted by experts. You may remember or not that Ertico helped us 2 years ago or 3 years ago, I don't remember now, in drafting the SUM topic guide on mobility as a service, which is a success story. I think that it has been downloaded so many times, and also the SUM guide on ITS services. We have other guides, so if you want to know a bit more about the link between ITS services, new services, and how to integrate it in a sustainable urban mobility plan, I invite you to go on our urban mobility website. There will be other actions from our side to improve the situation, the safety of vulnerable road users. Next slide, please. And then we discovered that our previous expert group on urban mobility was not inclusive and even conclusive. So we will create a new expert group where we will invite a wide range of stakeholders to put them all around the table to be able to discuss different topics such as public transport or shared and active mobility. And we will make sure that we do not overlap with other expert groups like the one currently, let's say, that has started not so long time ago on the multimodal digital mobility services. Next slide, please. Yes, that was my guess that I have reached the end of my presentation. That was clear enough.
Thank you very much, Isabel, for this very comprehensive overview. Indeed, the Commission are really having a lot of different initiatives that work well together and cover all of these different elements that are part of this topic. So thank you for this. We have now arrived to the second part where my colleague Jean-Charles will take over the moderation of the panel that will go a little bit more in depth. One thing I forgot to say was that this panel has 3 of the exhibitors who will be at our Congress in Toulouse. So not only can you listen to them here, but you also have the opportunity of learning more when we meet up face to face in Toulouse end of May. With that, Jean-Charles, over to you.
Thank you, Lisa. Welcome to everyone in this webinar. It's my pleasure to moderate the next part of the session. But first, maybe as an introduction, you have already seen that slide. And this cloud terminology show you how rich is this topic. Many of this terminology sometimes is confusing. But I think this is really now in the wind, and everyone is talking about this. Maybe the next slide now. And this topic is really very important for ethical and for the ethical partnership. In line with the Open Green Deal, we have now introduced the dimension of let's say the impact that we can have with all our activities. We have introduced that in our activities, and in fact, we have that in our clean and urban mobility area, as it was mentioned before. And here, just to remind you that it's not the same thing. Clean mobility is about pollutants, right? And eco-mobility is about reducing CO2. So these greenhouse emission, and these themes are complementary, and sometimes they go together. As you see on with all these logo, we have many activities at ECO on this topic, and what we focus most now and the target we are looking at is to develop the next generation of vehicles and also electrification, so how they will be introduced in the electrified transport infrastructure. Then to also reach a smart electromobility widely developed in cities. This is foreseen by the end of the 2030s. European-wide smart infrastructure for clean mode, that's also important. But finally, we talk a lot about all these, let's say, solutions that we bring on the market to solve our problematic. The question is mainly how really to measure the impact that we have. And this is also a very important thematic that we have. So having said that, this gives also now the hand to our speakers who will present some part of this topic from their perspective. I have the pleasure, so I will now introduce our different speakers. And our first speaker is Stephanie Gatesman, who is the Environmental Sustainability and Corporate Innovation Manager at CAPSH. And she will present the view from the infrastructure operator, let's say traffic management, road charging, etc. So Stephanie, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. So I'm happy to bring in the view of a company to sustainable mobility. So I'm going to focus on how to reduce emissions with ITS today. I'm, as said, Environmental Sustainability Manager at CAPSH. For those who don't know CAPSH, we are a global transport solution provider in the fields of tolling, traffic, and demand management. We have projects around the globe in more than 50 countries. And we have set ourselves in our new strategy, we have put ourselves the vision to contribute to a healthy world without congestion. This also fits to our sustainability strategy, which was stressed in the company strategy, which focuses on 2 environmental goals. So the first goal we set ourselves is to become CO2 neutral by 2027. And the second goal, even more important in my point of view, is to increase our green portfolio. So we set ourselves the goal to to get a positive eco balance. So we want to reduce more traffic emissions than it's caused with our solutions. Next slide, please. So why have we set this goal? Because transport is key in climate protection, but also air quality. So 25% of the emissions in the EU actually stem from transport. This is a huge amount. And road traffic is especially important here because 70% of transport emissions are from individual road traffic, so road traffic in general. And this is why we can't ignore this field. Of course, it's important to focus on public transport and bicycle lanes, but we really need to manage road traffic in an efficient way, because traffic is not only a driver of climate change, but also of air pollution. And globally, around 80% of inhabitants are subject to bad air quality. Next slide, please. So on this slide, I have summarized a bit of our studies and also scientifically reviewed studies on ITS. This only focuses on our fields of expertise. I know ITS is a very broad term, but for example, road charging is really our field of expertise. And here we have noticed that distance-based tolls can save up to 20% of CO2 emissions. And so this means the concept says you pay for what you drive. And this reinforces the polluter pays principle, which is also undermined in EU law. And road charging in general helps to push cleaner vehicles because in many road charging schemes, cleaner vehicles get a cheaper price to drive. And what we should also not forget is that road charging is a really important fiscal instrument, because since there is and will be an increasing number of electric vehicles, governments run out of gasoline taxes, which they usually use to invest in infrastructure. Another very interesting concept is the high occupancy lanes. This is used quite frequently in the United States and reinforces that passenger cars isn't only driven by one person, but multiple people use the car, and so there are less cars in the road in general, and they can go quicker because there's less congestion. I would really like to highlight the impact of low emission zones here, and I think this will play a crucial role in urban mobility. So they are a powerful tool to reduce toxic air pollution and CO2 emissions. We could see that in London, in Milano, in Stockholm, where up to 20% of CO2 was reduced, but also particulate matter was reduced significantly. And the traffic management should not be ignored as well, because we need to manage our traffic flows, especially when having, for example, a low emission zone in the center. We shouldn't have congestion around this area. So we need to avoid stop and go by putting efficient traffic light management incident management to predict accidents and so on. So 8 to 15% of CO2 emissions can usually be saved in traffic management when implementing traffic management systems. This is what our global projects have shown. What I also think needs a lot more attention in research is connected vehicles. Because we don't know, well, there's a lot of studies already, but we need more comprehensive studies with a common methodology to know how much can be saved when all vehicles are connected. And I agree a lot with the European Commission that we need a more holistic way. This is why we are working on a new concept called demand management. So this includes all the capabilities of the previous mentioned concepts. So signal control, routing, traffic prediction, dynamic pricing. So with this collective force, you can reduce emissions by up to or around 30%, which is quite impressive. Next slide, please. And I also want to use my time to speak to focus a little bit on the importance of policy, because we need the right policies to support the right technologies. And here I want to take the example of the taxonomy regulations. I think many of you have heard about it, but for those who don't, it's a classification system which lists environmental sustainable economic activities. And why is this so important? Because in the future, investments will be made in environmental sustainable economic activities. Companies which are taxonomy aligned, this is what it's called, will have access to finance or easier access to finance, and will be preferred when it comes to public procurement. So eventually it will affect the entire supply chain. And why I bring it up here, because road charging, even though the EU has acknowledged it as a decarbonization tool in its new Eurovignette directive, is not taxonomy eligible or aligned at the moment. Even though there's the policy, there is no technical screening criteria you need in order to be taxonomy eligible. And same goes for the other ITS sector. It seems to be left out at the moment. I think it's a pity. And what we need to do to change this situation is to have more scientific evidence on environmental impact on ITS. This is exactly what Jean-Charles said before. We need more studies, we need a common methodology to be able to explore different ITS fields and to compare them properly. And this is all needed in order to create a technical screening criteria and to be considered at all for example, the taxonomy regulation. Yeah, this is so it's a shout out to Ertico, the members and the sector to focus more on this topic and the positive potential we can have in the environmental field. And yeah, if you want to hear more about this topic, I'm happy to speak about it with you in Toulouse at the Congress in a couple of weeks. Thanks for having me today and looking forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. We take note. It will be in more than 2 weeks. It will be in June, I think, Congress. Then our next speaker will be is Olivier Perez. He's product and marketing director at EasyMile, and he will bring to you the view of the automation of transport with autonomous shuttles. So the floor is yours, Olivier.
Thank you, Jean-Charles, for the introduction. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Olivier Perez. I'm Product Marketing Director at EasyMile. You can go to the next slide. And even one further, please. So who is EasyMile? For those who don't know us, first, we come from Toulouse. So we are very happy to welcome all of you at home in a couple of months now. We are a software company. We provide complete solutions for driverless mobility, either to transport people, which is the focus of today's presentation, or to transport goods. And we partner with manufacturers that deliver the vehicles, and we put on that our embarked electronics and our sensor sets, and of course our software to make them fully autonomous. You can go to the next slide, please. So we have been deploying autonomous vehicles for more than 5 years. We have around 180 shuttles, autonomous shuttles, running more or less in all the developed countries in the world. And I wanted today to share with you key learnings. First learning, there is a real global demand for shared autonomous vehicles. Second, there is a solid business case behind those small-scale autonomous vehicles. Third, autonomous doesn't mean there is no human in the loop. And fourth, I wanted to share with you elements on our view on the very short term. And at EasyMile, we're convinced that we are now ready for level 4 operations that can deliver real value to the passengers. And in the next minutes, I'm going to deep dive on each of these 4 points. Can we go to the next slide, please? So here, it's very in line with the element that Mr. Fantom shared earlier in the seminar today. What we see is at the same time a willingness to have more mobility, especially for the elderly, for the disabled people, for I would say any type of users, and also the willingness to have more granular mobility, and at the very same time, a clear will to have less cars in the streets. And that's where we are convinced, and with not only EasyMile, it's also all the PTOs we have been working with, that there is a real market, a real demand, because these kind of small vehicles that you can see currently on the screen are designed precisely to complement existing transport means, to be not to replace, but to enrich the offer of public transport, and to solve the first and last mile issue in order to provide mobility to everyone and deter people from using their private cars to go to the job or to in their everyday life. It's also a nice way to provide for PTO to extend its network at a very reasonable cost, then there is close to zero infrastructure. Can we go to the next one, please? What we can see now, it's also that there is a solid business case behind. When you compare over the total lifetime of the shuttle, the cost of ownership, total cost of ownership of an autonomous shuttle versus a minibus with a human driver on board, then result is that you are around 30% cheaper. It's very linked to the fact that the salary of a human driver will represent up to 70% of the total cost of ownership of a classical minibus with a human driver on board. However, there are many other benefits, and if you can just click, which makes that the total business case has to be computed not only at vehicle level, but more at community level. Since you decrease the cost of those new mobility services, far more cities will be able to offer those new services to citizens, and it has very positive externalities. It provides mobility for everyone and more flexibility and controllability along the day. If I want to deploy 3 more buses, 3 more shuttles, I just click on a button and they are running in the street. There are also significant indirect benefits. The fact that there are less cars in the streets open the way for new sharing of space, for example, with more space for buildings, but also for recreation areas or for green spaces. And of course, it comes with safe environment and less polluted environment. Can we go to the next one, please? Third learning, there is always a human in the loop. You need daily routines, the classical ones for any type of vehicle, to clean the vehicle, to make sure that everything is working properly, but also a high-tech routine to make sure that sensors are well calibrated, that there is no issue with the high-tech elements included in the vehicle. And you also need a supervisor. What we call supervisor is someone, for example, who will be answering the calls coming from the shuttle if anything happens. It has to be someone local, first to master perfectly the language, but also to understand the fears and the expectations of the passengers. Can we go to the next one, please? The fourth learning is that collectively, we want to make sure for level 4 operations. When I say collectively, is regulators. Things are moving very fast at European level, in Europe, in Germany, in France. So regulation is becoming more and more stable. Things are still to be defined, but things are moving in the right direction. Public transport operators are now ready to take the jump and to go at scale with autonomous vehicles. And what we also see that in public acceptance, the fear that some people were afraid of in the general public is not materializing at all. People are not afraid of taking our vehicles, and the rate of adoption is very high, very quickly. And what I shared also on this slide, it's more on a techno side. Where are we on our roadmap? What you can see here is that we started level 4 operations, i.e. without any safety driver on board. I mean, there is passengers and a remote supervisor, but no one anymore in the vehicle to take care of the vehicle. We started in 2018, and we started with very easy use cases where we were just sharing the street, I would say, with pedestrians and bike. Now it's a totally different world. In Oncopole, so in Toulouse, so you will have all the opportunity to test that in a couple of weeks. We are now fully driverless on open roads, on a road that we share with cars, buses, bikes. So it's a big step further. Before the end of Q2, we'll be also fully driverless in Aryan Group. It's a large industrial site with tons of intersections. So the technology is there to start having real ODD. And maybe the last slide, please. So to conclude, we will all be very happy to see you. There will be EasyMilers all over the place because we play at home. It's where our headquarters are and our 200 and something R&D guys work. So we have a booth. There are also the technical visits, either at Oncopole or at Daer, where you will have the opportunity to the trucks that we also automatize. There will be also a technical visit at Francazal. Francazal is a ghost city. It's our test base. So it's kind of fascinating area where you can see all our rich portfolio of automated vehicles running. Thank you very much, and happy to get your questions at the end of this session.
Thank you very much, Olivier. We are looking forward to meeting you there, of course. Now we have our last speaker, who is Philippe Delmas, client consultant at EcoCounter, and he will present to you how the collection and use of data can be useful to measure how we consume our mobility in urban environment, typically micromobility. So the floor is yours, Philippe.
Thank you so much, Jean-Charles. Hello, everybody. Just click to the next slide. Thank you. So who is EcoCounter? EcoCounter is a French company based in Brittany, and we are specialized in pedestrian and bicycle counting for more than 20 years now. And we do this in natural environments, but of course also in urban areas. Next slide. And just one more click. Thank you. So here you have an overview of all the innovations we made during the last 20 years. So of course, we improved a lot the technologies we use to count pedestrians and cyclists. We also introduced some devices to collect automatically the count data. We also designed our own web platform, which is called EcoVisio. And right now we are more and more involved in data science. Next slide. So here you have a focus on the type of counters we can use in urban context, able to count different type of users. So to count bicycles and scooters or e-scooters, we use magnetic loops, because we know it is a more accurate way to count such kind of users. But when we have to count in more complex environments, or to count also some other vehicles, we use 2D cameras, like the one you can see on the right photo. And these 2D cameras are used with artificial intelligence algorithms. So you are, for example, able to count the pedestrian on sidewalks, bike on the bike lane, and motorized two wheels, cars and buses on the motorized lane, and this on a range up to 15 meters. So that's a very powerful tool, but of course you need some mains power to make it run. Contrary to the two other counters that are completely autonomous and can work on batteries. Click, please. Of course, our clients want to have data about active transportation mobility, but they often also want to communicate about their public policies. So we have these three types of displays, which are mainly used by our clients to show that there is a bike community in the city. And of course, it is also a great tool to make the promotion of bike and ped usage. So if they are well placed in the city, it's also a way to say to the car drivers blocked in the traffic jams, hey, and just have a look here, because if you just take your bike 1 or 2 days a week, you will be part of this great community. You will be able to go fast where you want to go, and it's a very nice way to let your car in the garage. Next slide, please. And regarding the data we can provide to our clients, so of course they will get all the count data from our counters, but on the web platform we can also provide some weather data. So for example, temperatures, rainfall, sunlight. And the goal of this is to have an objective analysis of the impact of weather conditions on the traffic, for example, on the bike traffic. So, for example, if you have a day with a lot of rainfalls, you can easily understand you will have more bike traffic. But the goal here is to make the right correlation between the real weather conditions and the traffic, and to have objective correlations and objective figures. Next slide. And as I said at the very beginning, we are more and more involved in data science and data studies. So the goal here is mainly to cross the counting data with other data sources. So here you have two examples of studies we made a few months ago. So at the bottom right, you can see the result of a combination of data between the count data, e-scooter count data from the counters we provided to Lyon Métropole, which is a metropolitan area of the town of Lyon in France. And we combined the count data with traffic data given by shared mobility operators. So as you can see, the red dots are almost perfectly aligned on the line. So that means there is a very strong correlation between the count data and the shared mobility and traffic data. And the conclusion was that 1 of 2 scooters driving in Lyon are provided by shared mobility operators. And at the top left, you can see a screenshot about a study we made for the city of Vancouver in Canada. And here the goal was to make the correlation between bike count data and the number of collisions there are between cyclists and cars. And the conclusion is very interesting because the probability to have a crash, so a collision between a cyclist and a car, is much more higher when the bike traffic is very low. And that's quite easy to understand, because when you are in a city center where you have a lot of bikes on the bike lane and at the intersections, the car drivers are obliged to be aware of the presence of cyclists. They have to slow down. So even if you have some collisions, the probability and the collision rate will be much more lower than in suburbs areas where the presence of bikes at the intersections could be more problematic for the car drivers. Next slide. So thank you for your attention. And even if EcoCounter is based in Brittany, I'm personally geographically based in Toulouse, and I will be happy to see you on our booth at the Congress, of course.
Very good. Thank you very much, Philippe. We'll be there, and we'll take the opportunity to see you, of course. Now, we are reaching the Q&A session, and I think first I would like to know if there is any questions from the audience. Rita, do you know that? Or...
So the questions, they have been given in throughout the discussion here on the tool. But perhaps we can start. I would actually like to go back and ask Isabel from the European Commission a question in terms of mobility management. Isabel, can you talk a little bit more about how you see the link between ITS and mobility management?
Yes, indeed. So actually, mobility management may be the term where you go from traffic management to a more, let's say, multimodal and more holistic approach in terms of managing the flows. And mobility management is, I think, a bit linked to the presentation of Stephanie, where she was calling it demand management. Maybe mobility management is not the same because mobility management gives maybe the tools to the mobility manager of a city with receiving the data. For example, the data received from counting sensors, like we have just seen. So they receive all the data from the different source, and they can let's say adapt more easily and in a quicker way how they plan their city, or they plan their street, or they could adapt their traffic signal. So it's so clearly ITS is really at the core of mobility management. And so, if I can say it again, going from traffic management to mobility management, so a more multimodal approach, so something closer maybe to what we would like to do in terms of sustainable mobility.
Very good. Thank you very much, Isabel. I think it's a good link also to the question I would like to ask Stephanie. And with respect to the infrastructure, there is some success with low emission zone. Why is it successful? And how is the future of these, I would say, solutions in cities?
Yes, before answering that question, I would like to go back to Isabel. And yes, exactly, this mobility management concept is also behind what we are calling demand management, because in the end, you have to focus on the demand of the citizens and plan it accordingly. So incentivize the use of public transport or cycling, and inform them about congestion or closed streets due to event or certain policies put in place. And so now back to the proper question, the low emission zone question. So low emission zones are really an own field of expertise, but what we could see, and also studies show, is that the pricing scheme behind it is really important. So the prices shouldn't be set too low, because if it costs €1 to go to the city center, many citizens would be willing to do that as long as they will have parking space available. And what is also really important is that there is sufficient public transport infrastructure available to have this modal shift. And what is another important topic is public acceptance. And what studies have shown is that public acceptance, when the system, or before the system was introduced, a low emission zone system, it was always quite low. But as soon as this system was implemented, the acceptance again rose again, because people could see that they have more space, better air quality, and a better life quality in general.
Okay, thank you. And very quickly, what will be then the impact on electric vehicle, because an electric vehicle is not really emitting. So he will enter the zone with no problem, or?
Well, I think right now, this is the policy of many cities that electric vehicles can still enter for free or park for free. And this is, I think, to boost the transitions to electric vehicles. But as soon as there is sufficient electric vehicles around, I think policies need to change, because we shouldn't aim for traffic jams full of electric vehicles. This is not where we want to go, because they take space, and we shouldn't forget that they all also still contribute to air quality problems with particulate matter. So
Exactly.
policies need to adapt to this transition along the way.
Space pollution. Okay, very good. Thank you very much. I have also a question for Olivier Perez. And you presented now your roadmap and where you are with your roadmap, but what are really the main challenges to tackle for these automated or autonomous shuttle that you see?
I would say that I see mostly two challenges. The first would be on demonstrating the level of safety of our systems. To be as good as a human driver, which is the bare minimum we can expect from a new system, it's not something that you can determine through statistics of number of kilometers driven, or we would have to drive our vehicles during centuries before being able to prove that. So it's more mathematical approach called formal proof, which is something terribly complex. So there is a techno challenge on our side, which is to demonstrate the level of safety of the systems. The second challenge I would see is more on the regulatory side. Things are moving well, what I said during my presentation. However, it's still not the end of the day on those questions. And the fact that each country is pushing its own regulation, make it very complex from an industrial point of view to try to adapt to all those elements. So more harmonization would definitely help.
Very good. So I don't know if Lisa, you want,
Yeah, no, it's fine. It's super interesting. I actually just wanted to also come back to Joost again, Joost van Tomme. You did mention that, of course, this is a very topical area for Ertico, but can you talk a little bit more about how it is really at the DNA of Ertico and of ITS?
Yeah, how many hours do we have? I'll give a short explanation. So, we started years ago with RTS, and RTS is actually connecting all the elements in the ecosystem. Intelligent transportation system, so making things intelligent, making it connected, even automated and up to autonomous. That's the first step that we did with the Commission, actually, also in the whole regulatory agenda and the innovation deployment that we do with research. The second step is bringing that into an ecosystem of sustainability. Yeah? So the agenda of the United Nations, together with the European agenda, we are actually frontrunner in the CO2 discussions and the Green Deal, is to bring that element into the picture as well. It was not part of the whole ITS discussion, I think, even not 10 years ago. It actually came part now, the sustainability part. And Isabel nicely mentioned that. It's part of the sums as well for cities. And so that is actually something we do every day in our DNA. One of the focus areas of Ertico is indeed sustainable and clean mobility. And in terms of concrete projects, we have quite a number of projects where sustainability is part of, hand in hand with I would say, technology innovation. The jury is still out on the concrete impacts of digitization and on traffic management, for example, and in automation on the sustainability agenda. That still has to be proven by more scientific approaches as well. But we definitely believe it's in our DNA, of course. Yeah, that's clear.
Excellent.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think Isabel wants to add something about the low emission zone. So how I mean, integrating rural and urban area.
So no, maybe I wanted to add something. So some of you may remember that this topic of low emission zone is really a sensitive topic in Europe, because on the one hand, it is necessary for cities to have low emission zones for the good reason explained by Stephanie. But at the same time, we have also seen that sometimes the city, they do not consider maybe sufficiently the businesses and the drivers coming from outside the city. And so we have been I have not mentioned it in my presentation, but we will continue to build let's say what should be the digital and technical solution to let's say make low emission zone and urban vehicle access regulation as a whole more acceptable in the EU, and to make sure that it is fluid, so that the city authorities, they receive the information they need on the vehicle characteristic, and at the same time that the foreign drivers can easily enter the cities without problem, because we have a lot of problems and a lot of fragmentation. So just to let you know that it is an important work, because we need to, that's one aspect, and I think that you have also mentioned it several times, that we have the green and clean mobility, as you said, Jean-Charles, at the beginning, at the one side, and then you have the digital solution at the other side, and we have a lot of potential, and low emission zones are an example of potential where the digital solution will provide solution to all.
Indeed. Thank you very much, Isabel. I have a question here for Philippe, and this is a question that we have discussed a number of times in the previous webinar, and that is the impact of COVID. Can you talk a little bit about the shift you have seen from your work in terms of transportation usage in this period?
Yeah, of course. So we made some traffic indicators, bike traffic indicators, and by comparing 2021 to 2019, before the pandemic, we see across Europe, so across 12 European countries, an average increase in bike traffic around 13%. And this is particularly the case during the weekends, where we have a 29% increase of the bike use. And if we go more in depth in this study, we can see that 9 of the 12 countries we studied had an increase in bike usage on 2021 compared to 2019. And surprisingly, Germany was not part of these 9 countries, and there is an explanation, because in Germany, first half of 2021 was still faced with pandemic problems, lockdowns, and a lot of home office and homework. So we had a decrease in bike usage in Germany in 2021, but I think 2022 will be a good year for bike usage in Germany. And what we can also learn from our indicators is that public transport is a bit more or less used than before. Bike usage and micromobilities have increased a lot, that's clear. And the cars, individual cars, came back to the same level than before the COVID pandemic.
Oh, really?
Unfortunately, we can say.
But this is a natural consequence of this COVID, because people didn't want to mix together, right? So they didn't take public transport, they took their individual car, or the micromobility, of course, but did you see an impact, I would say, in the cities of, the public authorities building on the infrastructure? I mean, for example, a dedicated lane for the bikes, these type of things. I know that I'm living in Lausanne. They set up some in Switzerland. They set up some of these bicycle lanes, and now they will keep it. They will not change that. They
Absolutely.
will not go back to. So what is very interesting is that the cities are changing, and I think what we need to go where is it's to have a good mixture, I would say, of the solutions, not forcing anyone to use one. But okay, this is my point. I think we need to offer different possibilities, and then people choose because they have that choice and they also are informed, right? That's the key. If you're not informed, you take your car, right? That's very easy.
You should take the bike. I'm a big biker. It's very
okay, very good.
very nice.
yeah.
I have a little question for Olivier here. I noted that you focus very much on the fact that autonomous does not equal that there is no human in the loop, right? And my question is, will this realization and communication around this point, do you think that will help tackle some of the worries and the fears? You know, will it help improve the acceptability a little bit by those who are still a little uncertain about you know, this autonomous car without humans as people normally understand autonomous cars?
Definitely. And the fact that, as I mentioned, that the human that you can interact with is someone who speaks your language and understand how, as a citizen of a given country, what you expect from transportation is, in our eyes, critical to have a success for this technology. So definitely a clear yes to your question. Then the challenge is to be economically viable. Our view is that we need a supervision for, let's say, a fleet of 10 to 20 vehicles to make sure that at the end there is still a business case behind. But all the tests that we conducted so far definitely go in this direction.
Yeah, I have for you one question also, because another challenge is that, of course, with the automation of transport and having, I would say, this shared automated system, we bring also more people on the road. You may think of very, I mean, people who do usually never take individual transport, or I would say little collective transport, the elderly people, the disabled people, the kids. I mean, less back and forth for the parents. I don't know. I mean, so there is somehow kind of a challenge about how the mobility is organized in the area, but also, I mean, in the city, but also I would say in the region, right? Because it also will enable people to go easier from, let's say, the village to the city and vice versa,
Absolutely
right?
right. Absolutely
so
right.
How this is really a kind of a SAMP problem, and I think each region will have its own solution. But how? I mean, did you think about that, and what is your view on this?
So first, this question, exactly as you mentioned, is very specific to each region, to each city. I would even say to each neighborhood in some cases. We deployed in a retirement village in Australia. So defining the mobility needs of those people was something very specific. And to be frank, this is not the heart of what we do. That's why we always partner with local PTOs. That's their knowledge, all their background. It's what they know the best, how to serve people and how to give the best mobility experience to people. We are there only a techno break. Our challenge for us is to be compatible with the maximum of users. So that's why the shuttle is out to match the needs of elderly people, of people with a wheelchair, of kids. That's why also from the background of the software, we are interoperable with, I would say, all the on-demand big softwares that you can have currently deployed. So that we give just one techno break into a broader system that has to be designed by the people who are the specialists of that, which is not EasyMile.
Interesting. Stephanie, I have a quick question for you to the demand management strategy that you were talking to us about, and how all the elements together would save up to 30% of CO2 in total. And the question is, what makes up the biggest part of those 30%? Which of the tools that you were mentioning do you think, or do you expect to have the biggest footprint in that reduction?
I would say it is the congestion charging scheme, and here it depends greatly on the pricing scheme you put behind it, because of course if it's not that cheap to enter, you think about it, you plan ahead, you take the public transport, and also the income which is made by this congestion charging scheme can be used to fund public transport and to extend it.
Okay, well, we look forward to that. So we're coming to an end. It's 3:15. I want to thank everybody who participated. Of course, very importantly, our speakers and my co-moderator here, Jean-Charles. Thank you very much. And thank you, of course, last but not least, those who have been listening and sending questions. Talk to you soon. We have our next webinar in a month's time. Thank you for now.